This is John Bailey, the epic voice of Honest Trailers, and you're listening to the Fiveish Fangirls Podcast. It's a Fangirls podcast with five-ish people. The tangents and squee will continue. Squee.
The tangents this week continue all the way to episode 248 of the Fiveish Fangirls podcast. And we're very excited to have a new friend, a new guest on this week's show. I hope you enjoy talking to her as much as I think we're going to enjoy talking to her. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you tell I make these things up off the top of my head? Maybe I should play D&D. Maybe I should play D&D.
You should. That's the whole part of it.
Yep. Critical Role. Sign me up. All right. Welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Fiveish Fangirls podcast. So glad you could join us. Let's start off like we do every week. We'll go on the virtual table and see who's joined us this week.
This is Brittany in Bethlehem.
This is Chrissy in Salt Lake City.
This is Sally from Wisconsin.
And this is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So we are going to skip the news and all that fun stuff this week because we do have a guest. So, but there hasn't really been a whole lot of news anyway. After our mini dump truck of news last week, it has not quite piled up again. So, but that just means we'll probably have some fun news to cover next week's episode.
Watch, like tomorrow after we're,
Yes, something big will drop.
Yeah. We'll just save it for next week.
Yep. And next week we'll all go, oh man.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way things go.
Indeed.
So on this week's episode, we are super excited to have. She's got a lot of labels: singer, actress, cosplayer, YouTuber, social media, person. She wears a lot of hats and sometimes horns and sometimes tails and sometimes centaur legs. But we are super excited to welcome to the podcast Ginny D.
Hi. That was a good attempt at a description of what I do. I struggle with that description myself.
Oh, yeah. It's like when you do anything and everything to, pay the rent, you wear a lot of hats. So.
Yeah, my dad, when people ask, describes me as sort of like a model, is like his best description.
Yeah.
Which I think leads people in a really different direction in terms of what they think I'm doing.
Yeah, which that might be a rabbit hole we might get down here in a little bit. So, but first things first, for the people that don't know who you are, which at this point is, I can't imagine not a lot of people know who you are, considering not even a month ago and some change, you'd celebrated 50,000 YouTube subscribers, and now you're at over 80,000.
Yeah, it's
YouTube
wild.
Subscribers. You've got almost 40,000 Twitter followers. So there's a few people that know who you are, just a couple. But for the few people that don't know who you are, give us the Cliff Notes, the TLDR of your start with, I guess, YouTube and or cosplay, because those two kind of go hand in hand. But
yeah, they do. They did for me, at least. So I started creating stuff for the internet in, I think 2011 is around when I began. And the first thing I did was I started a YouTube production, like a parody production group with some friends. It was called Not Literally, and we made mostly Harry Potter parodies, although we branched out later into other things. And that was also around the same time that I started cosplaying. I was a different kind of nerd before that. Like, I worked at the Renaissance Festival and I was in theater, but I wasn't like a geeky kind of nerd before that because I didn't really know about that whole universe. So then once I met nerds at the Renaissance Festival, I started going to conventions and I started cosplaying, and I learned that making fan content was something that I could do for other people, not just for funsies. So that was sort of the start for me. And then over the next few years, I sort of experimented and tried a bunch of other things. And here I am now. I've shifted into, I guess, like the tabletop role-playing community space more recently, which is something that's pretty new to me. I still cosplay, obviously. This has become my full-time job, all of this creative stuff, which is kind of crazy. And my YouTube channel has expanded beyond just parody and stuff like I used to do with Not Literally. Now I still do music, but I also do comedy bits and, like, I don't know, I guess you'd call them opinion pieces, or I don't know, all kinds of stuff. Basically, I'm not much better at describing what I do than you are. It's kind of all over the map.
Yeah.
I do a lot. I call myself, in general, the easiest way to describe it all is a creator or an online creator.
Yeah, an online content creator.
Yeah.
A professional nerd. That's what I like to call myself.
Absolutely.
A professional nerd. So, yeah. So, like I told you in the short time we had to chat when I saw you at Gen Con, is I discovered you however many, it seems like ages now, however many years ago it's been now, when Pokemon Go launched, and you were one of the first people to put together a Pokemon Go trainer cosplay, and went sort of viral from that.
It did. That was such a weird one because Pokemon Go was like such a phenomenon, and that costume went everywhere. It was probably my most viral costume I've ever made. And yet most of the people it was reaching had no idea what cosplay was. So they were just like, where do I buy this? And it was just a weird situation.
Yeah. And then I don't remember how much longer after that, but you've gone viral kind of a couple of times.
I have, yeah.
But you went kind of viral again when you started cosplaying Aria from Game of Thrones, who you are a very, very good dead ringer for Maisie Williams, even not in Aria's outfits. So the fact that you cosplay her, and you could be her stunt double.
Thank you. If I could do stunts, maybe. Yeah, that's one of those things that I am really lucky that I like Game of Thrones, because I hear, has anyone ever told you that you look like Maisie Williams? Like, I hear that no matter what I'm wearing or what I'm doing. So now at least I can link them to my cosplay portfolio and be like, actually, yes.
Yes. Buy my prints here.
Yeah.
Have you seen my calendar? So since then, I mean, you've done cosplay covering all sorts of different fandoms and properties, from anime to Game of Thrones to Disney princesses to, obviously now Critical Role is a big chunk of what you do and what you're really recognizable for now. You were dressed as Jester, I think, the day I saw you at Gen Con. So
that's the big one.
Yeah. I am not a D&D player, although I've been told I should be. So some people think I would be really good at it and really enjoy it. If I could find a campaign to join, I probably would, actually. I need to find some friends. Chrissy's really like, well, if you live closer to me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things with tabletop games, is that not just finding people who want to play, but finding the right people for you, because I think everybody wants a different kind of game, and it's important to find the people who want the same kind of game that you do. Because I thought I didn't like D&D for a long time because I had played with people who wanted to play a very different game than what I would enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyone out there in the Indy area, Indianapolis surrounding area, looking for someone who is a complete noob, I'm your gal. Odds are I'm going to be a bard. I don't know if I know that much. Personality wise, disclaimer right up front, I'm probably a bard.
Disclaimer, I'm a bard. That's great.
You could do that. You could add that to your next pickup line video.
Hey girl, I need to warn you. I'm a bard.
Yes. Is that a deal breaker?
Not for the right people.
Yeah, exactly. My husband's going to hear this later and just be like, oh, Lord. So I actually went back and watched your I guess, I don't know if it's actually your first video, but it's the first video that appears on your channel. I don't know if you've ever, taken down anything, or if what you see on your channel is what you've always had up there.
I've definitely taken things down.
Okay.
I've had that channel for a long time.
So the first video that comes up, if you scroll back by date, the first video is from like 8 years ago, and it's your parody of Friday, all about Ravenclaws.
Oh yeah.
Which is funny, and it's cute, and it's obvious that just like us with the podcast, the early stuff, you're doing what you can with the know-how and the technology you have available to you. So I totally understand like the production value to that versus like your newest video, which we will talk about in a moment. There's a significant difference, but after 8 years, you're bound to learn a thing or two. As a Slytherin, though, I have to take a little offense to your smackdown of the Slytherins. We're not all bad.
Yeah, there's as someone who would absolutely be sorted Slytherin if I were sorted today. While I certainly think I would be Ravenclaw if I got sorted at 11, but if I were sorted today, I would 100% be Slytherin. I think one of the reasons why I have comments turned off on that video is that I got tired of 8 years of people getting offended about the jokes I made about their house in that video. Because back when I made it, I was making it I was in this Tumblr Hogwarts roleplay thing, if that tells you anything about the time period.
Yeah. So kind of like a LAN community.
Yeah, it was like you could do things to earn points for your house, and some of it was like if you drew a picture or if you took a photo in house merchandise or whatever, you'd get points. And Ravenclaw was lagging behind, and I was like, I'm going to go all out and push Ravenclaw into the lead, and that's why I made that video. And I did not expect anybody outside of that Tumblr community to even see it, which was a rude awakening when I woke up the next day and had like tens of thousands of views and was being featured on like Topless Robot and stuff. It was very strange.
But yes. Oh my goodness, Tumblr. Oh, that's a part of the internet I'm glad I got away from.
Same.
I get away, and then like I accidentally go back and get stuck again.
Like, yeah, I think I deleted or disabled or locked my account or something just to make sure that wouldn't happen. Because I did that a few times and I was like, I need to stop this.
Yeah.
I don't miss it. Twitter has filled that void in my heart for arguing with strangers and finding memes.
Yeah. Well, then that's a rabbit hole we could go down too. But obviously, since then, you've continued to create music videos. Like quite a bit of them are parodies, although you have done some original stuff too. But all of it's been mostly fandom related. Although you do have your birthday unboxing musical.
Oh yeah,
musical.
Yeah, I think that may be the only music on my channel that is not related to a fandom. And I think calling it music is a little bit of a stretch too.
But just recently, it's 4 days. It's only been 4 days as of recording this. Your newest music video has dropped, which is Jester's Mom, which is a parody of the song Stacy's Mom, for those of us that are old enough to remember when that was on the radio. That took me back.
I have stories of that song. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few people are upset that we reminded them that song exists.
Just when I got it out of my head.
Yeah. But you've got that video's got almost 150,000 views on it already.
It is wild. This is actually the biggest music video debut that I've had on my channel ever.
Wow.
It's not my most popular video yet because a few of them have racked up a lot of views over time, but this is the strongest start I've ever had. It's been really crazy.
Yeah. And based on your Twitter feed, it's catching a lot of that. I think is coming from the Critical Role, the fandom. I've seen a lot of tweets, people tagging you saying, "You watched this video," And I actually saw, I actually knew it was coming before you launched it because we have a mutual acquaintance, Wes, the portrait dude.
Oh, yeah.
Who I have worked with several times for cosplay photography. I know he's a big fan of you. So he's touting your praises on his Facebook every so often. So,
that's
but
very sweet.
Yeah, but he had actually posted something about it on his Facebook before the video dropped because one of the photos that he took is in the video.
Yes, we had a little cameo.
Yeah, so he was very excited about that.
Yeah, that photo shoot was my first time ever working with him, and it was great. We worked together at DragonCon, and it was awesome. He's such a cool guy, and his approach to cosplay photography is pretty unique among cosplay photographers.
Yeah, he's very much about capturing the person with lighting and his ability to shoot anywhere and make it look good are some of his pictures are like, and he has a series called "You Shot That Where," where he will show an image where it came out of the camera versus after he's done some touch-ups. Look at this ugly carpet that in this hallway that we shot in, and now look, this looks like this amazing dramatic image. So yeah, I love Wes and his style of photography. I just wish he wasn't so far away, all the way over to Ohio, so I could work with him more often.
So many cosplay photographers are like that, where you're like, oh, I'm so glad that I get to see you once a year at this one convention, but
Exactly.
I wish we could shoot together more.
Exactly. So it's like, I have so many cosplays. So let's talk a bit more about some of your specific cosplays and how you've kind of found some unique ways to, since you've made essentially cosplay and content creation your full-time job in the last few years, how you've kind of found some ways to make a living, make sure that you can pay the rent, because obviously getting invited to conventions to either be a judge or as a special guest is always nice. By the way, how was Norway?
It was great. It was cold, so I came back and it snowed like 2 days after I got back to Denver, and I was like, I'm prepared for this. Norway has hardened me.
Yeah. It's a different kind of cold over there.
It is. Yeah, it was cool. We got to see the Northern Lights, which was awesome.
Oh, nice. That's very cool.
Bucket list stuff.
Yeah. So, obviously things like going to conventions, being able to sell prints are nice. You have a Patreon, which a lot of creators do. But you've also branched out into some more interesting money-making ventures and creative ventures. You've done the last couple of years. You've done calendars, specifically pinup style calendars, but they've been fandoms. So you've done the Harry Potter pinup style calendar, and then you did the Maidens of Ice and Fire, which is all Game of Thrones characters.
Yeah, those have been fun.
Yeah. So where did the ideas to do that come from?
So I actually did my first 6 Harry Potter pinups. I did, or maybe it was 3. I don't even remember. I think it was 6. I did the first few for Valentine's Day as sort of like a special, fun, limited edition print sale thing. And when I shared them, people were like, "Oh my God, you should make this into a calendar." So I spent, obviously that was in February, so I had plenty of time to do another 6 to add it up to a 12-month calendar. And that was the first time I had done a calendar before, but it was just a general cosplay calendar, and it wasn't very popular. So I had been like, okay, guess that's not a thing for me, and sort of set that aside. But the Harry Potter pinup calendar did really well, and that made me energized to try it out with some new fandoms after that. I've always been a big fan of classic pinup artwork. Just aesthetically, I find it to be really pretty, and I have been an admirer of Gil Elfgren's pinup art specifically for a really long time, which is whose pinups I based my Harry Potter pinups on. And actually, after the Game of Thrones calendar, I had used so many of Gil Elfgren's pinups as bases for my photos that I have had to start branching out and learning about more pinup artists, which has been really fun and really cool. More art exploration than I am used to doing.
And you shoot, you design and you make all the costumes and design everything, and you do the shoots and you do all the editing and the compositing. I mean, your compositing work is amazing. Goals.
Thank you so much. Yeah, my
Girlfriend.
fiance shoots my pinup photos because it can be really hard to match the pose to an image. So he's very good at being like, lift your chin 1 inch or like move your elbow out more. And then I do all the editing. And for the Game of Thrones calendar, I made 12 new Game of Thrones costumes in like 3 months, which was hell, and I'm never doing that again.
Yeah. I remember seeing your social media posts like, why am I doing this to myself?
Just see like months
I
of
know
me
nothing
panicking.
about making cosplay, but that just sounds insane.
Especially Game of Thrones, because their costumes are so complex.
Yes. Yeah. And then now you have recently completed a successful crowdfunding campaign for a book. You've been working with Hannah Alexander, right?
Yes.
For a book called Center of Attention, which I love the title. For that. It's a kind of a how-to yet also picture coffee table type.
Yeah, it's like a
book?
combination art book and instructional book for cosplay creation. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Hannah does. Oh, sorry.
No, Hannah does amazing art.
She's been designing for the cosplay community for many years now. Designing a lot of her illustrations are intended to be followed as designs for cosplay crafting, which is a cool combination for us to team up on, because that way she gets to pitch out the designs, like, here are some ways that you could make centaur costumes, and then I get to say, and here's how you'd go about doing that. So it was a really fun match. We've been following each other's work for a long time, and we're friends, and we've talked about collaborating for a while, so this was sort of the perfect storm.
Yeah, and that kind of came out of the Centaurettes cosplay that you did a few years ago for one of the characters from Walt Disney's Fantasia, which I enjoyed watching the photo, what progress photos you would post building that, like you like carving like foam and doing all sorts of things. I'm all down for a girl that knows her way around a power tool. So.
It's been really a unique cosplay crafting experience for me, because even though I grew up with my dad teaching me and my brother how to use tools and stuff and having access to his workshop, most of my cosplay craftsmanship is sewing centric. So doing an actual build like that was really unique, and it was a new challenge for me.
And it's a really, really cool build, and the fact that you were able to come up with a way to, one, be able to wear it so that it's comfortable and you can get out of it quickly enough to go to the bathroom and things like that. But it also the legs articulate as you walk. So it's a feat of engineering, especially for cosplay. So.
Thank you. I've always loved the Fantasia Centaurette designs so much, just in terms of being aesthetic, pastel, like classic style of illustration. I love all the flowers and lily pads and just weird nature stuff that they're wearing. And so I always wanted to cosplay one, but it seemed impossible. And then I saw actually two different people who have created centaur costumes from different properties. Liz Brickley did a World of Warcraft centaur costume, and I can't remember her name, but she's European, and she made an absolutely beautiful articulated centaur that's articulated in a completely different way than mine. Hers has like a support in the tail that allows the back to be on wheels, which seems much less heavy than my situation. But anyway, I saw those and I realized it was actually possible to make a centaur costume that moves like a centaur, and that became my new goal. And for a few years, I put that off as like a dream costume, air quotes. But I have decided not to do dream costumes anymore because I feel like that puts them on this pedestal that makes them feel really unachievable. And every time I've tackled a dream costume, it has been totally achievable. So now I'm just like, okay, if I'm dreaming about something, I'm just going to make it. So that's what I did with my centaur, and I'm really glad I did because I love it.
In the book, like I said, you did a crowdfund for that, and that was successful. So now you're at the point where the books have been printed and you're getting ready to send those out to backers. But once you have that completed, will the book eventually become available like through your website or maybe through Hannah's or something like that?
Hannah and I still are discussing how we're going to put the PDF up for sale, but at the very least it will be linked to on my website regardless of where it goes up. So we're going to have the PDF available, and then once we've sent out rewards, we are going to make a limited run of the print books available because we've had a lot of people who missed the campaign who wished they could have a print copy of the book. We're not going to offer that ongoing, though, because that would require inventory, which sucks.
Yeah. All right. So let's, since you're talking about, you mentioned, not wanting to have dream cosplays because, that makes them somewhat seem like they're unattainable. I kind of want to talk about something that I saw you shared on your Twitter, I think last week. And it was a thread by another cosplayer that had recently been at an event with Yaya Han, who was at Gen Con when you were there, actually. But I guess Yaya Han made a comment about, because I'm a cosplayer too. I mean, I'm not, I'm a slow cosplayer, but I'm dedicated. But Yaya Han, I guess, made a comment about how she thinks that cosplay, at least craftsmanship is concerned, has reached a ceiling. And there's this nice thread I can put a link to in the show notes if people want to read it. And it's a good conversation considering I know people have got varying opinions, and thankfully I've never really encountered people in the cosplay community that are not the nicest and all of that, but I know there can be some. But this conversation, at least from what I could see on Twitter, was a pretty good back and forth of people of varying opinions. But I know I'm always amazed when I go to conventions at what people come up with as far as designs and builds and stuff. And not just necessarily the huge honkin' made out of 5 bazillion pounds of foam armor builds, but people that spend their time, hand beading and hand embroidering and things like that as far as design and construction. I'm just always amazed at what people are capable of. But do you think that we've reached, a ceiling, or do you think as long as there's still people coming into the craft of cosplay, and as long as technology keeps advancing and people think outside the box, that we're never really going to hit that wall or that ceiling with cosplay?
I think I think yes and no about a cosplay ceiling, because on the one hand, I am with you. I think that everybody brings something wholly unique to cosplay, and whatever you make, no one else is going to be able to make exactly the same thing. And I do think that is, I mean, that I wouldn't still be cosplaying if I felt like there was an upper limit on how creative people could be, or how many new ideas people could have. I definitely think there's always something new to do. However, I absolutely see Yaya's point here, and I agree with it also, because I think that more of what she's saying is that there is something of an upper limit on how much you can push the envelope and do something that's never been seen before in terms of the actual craftsmanship. Like, there are people out there, you look at somebody like down in Creative Studios who created the Wasp from Ant-Man and the Wasp, and like hand sculpted every silicone piece and had, articulated moving wings that popped out of her back. And like, or you see Major Sam cosplay who hand sequined the entire Indiana Jones dress. Like, there are people doing things that you can't push much further, than that. You can't push much further than a functional Iron Man suit that like fires weapons and lights up, And I do think it's worth thinking about what we are looking for in a craftsmanship costume contest, for instance, which I think was the context of the conversation.
Yeah, I believe so.
Which is that when you're judging like a master's craftsmanship competition where people have come from all over the country or even all over the world bringing their best work, you're going to see there are too many people in cosplay and people are too talented. You're going to hit a point where there are so many amazing people and none of them are better than the others. And I think that is a really difficult thing to deal with in the competition space. I just recently judged a craftsmanship competition in Norway, and it was my first time doing a competition of that scale. And so we did hours of pre-judging beforehand where everybody came and brought like a binder with their progress photos and reference images. And we got to turn up their hems and look at the insides of the costumes and stuff. And that was a pretty new experience for me. And I felt lucky in that there was really only one entrant where we couldn't find a single flaw with the costume. And that was the one that we chose as first place. But I could see, if this were not at a small convention in Norway, I could see there being multiple costumes where nobody had done anything wrong, where you have more than one person who has a perfect costume. In which case, how do you determine who's the best? How do you determine who takes best in show? I think that's something that we as a community are going to have to start facing, because it then comes down to judge interest. Like, who do the judges think is the coolest costume?
Yeah. Yeah. Then you're almost getting into like almost like dog show territory, which it sounds like a weird comparison, but my mom's got a dog that's a former dog show competitor, so I have some experience from that, where you have what the judges are going to look for as far as what is agreed upon for a breed. And in this case, it could be, what do you expect to see when somebody uses foam versus when somebody does beading or something like that. And it really comes down to the judges. And if you get a different judge or a different set of judges, you could come up with a completely different outcome. Because you've got the best of the best already in front of you. And then you got to pick one that's like, this is the best of the best of the best of the best.
Yeah, and that's when it gets down to super nitpicky stuff like, okay, you finished your seams, but this other person did French seams. Or like, okay, but is it fully lined? Like things that aren't even necessarily a hallmark of a better costume. You just have to think about like what pushes this person above the next person in line.
Yeah. Does this person get more points because they have electronics or something that's automated?
Yeah, like we had somebody in the competition in Norway who had done all of her own metalsmithing for all of the gold and silver pieces on the costume, which is really cool. And she was like, I'm a goldsmith. This is what I do. So like, is that more impressive than somebody who did, say, electronics for the first time? Because she is a goldsmith, so she does that all the time. So does that make it more or less impressive that she did all of her own metalsmithing? It just becomes a more complicated question, I think. And and somebody like Yaya is seeing the biggest and best competitions because she does so many conventions as a judge. So I'm sure that she's in this situation more often than the average cosplayer is.
Yeah. I told her when I saw her at Gen Con, and it was Saturday afternoon, so the cosplay competition hadn't happened yet, and I was like, I don't want to be in your shoes. It was like, I've been going to Gen Con for several years, and I go and watch the cosplay competition, and we just have some amazing people that come to Gen Con as far as cosplayers are concerned. And she's like, yeah, that's what I've heard. So even someone like her who's been cosplaying for 20 years still recognizes the fact that she's not, as much as she's seen, she knew that she was going to probably see some things that were going to blow her socks off.
Yeah, we got to judge together at El Paso Comic-Con, actually, which was where I first met her. And I thought it was great to be able to judge with her because that was a pretty small contest. And there were a few things that me and the other judge were getting hung up on where she had enough experience that she was able to say, like, well, think about it this way, or think about it from this perspective, or here's this issue that really sort of, it sort of drove home like, oh, yeah, you've done this a lot. You've done this a lot.
Yeah. So, but that being said, for anybody who's listening, don't, and this is one of those things that came up in that Twitter conversation is, yes, there are some amazing cosplayers out there and people are, pushing the limits and pushing themselves. But anyone who may be listening that is a new cosplayer, don't let that scare you away from the hobby. So that's definitely one thing that we want to make sure is pointed out.
Yeah, well, and that's something I think I really like how some cosplay competitions will have like a master's category and then a beginner's category to make it possible for people who are newer to the hobby to compete without feeling like they have to compete with those people who have been doing it for a decade. Yeah. Plus, you don't have to do competitions at all. I actually don't enjoy competing. I don't enter competitions myself. I have a few times in the past, but it's not something I prioritize anymore. And you don't have to compete. You can cosplay for a million other reasons.
Oh yeah. I've competed once in the years, and I've judged too. I've been on both sides, and honestly, I think being a judge was more nerve-wracking than competing.
It can definitely be stressful sometimes.
Yes, it can be. But it's such a fun hobby, though, and that's the thing is, you can see, some of these amazing cosplayers with their amazing builds, and you can either let that, whether you want to compete or not, you can either let that intimidate you or you can let that inspire you. And honestly, I try to let that be more inspiring, than intimidating. That doesn't mean I'm going to go buy, a whole bunch of Warbler and start trying to build a whole suit of armor. No, but I just know that I know that person didn't necessarily start with that amazing cosplay. There are some people where they've got some amazing cosplays and it's their very first one. But a lot of times you do have that glow up that a lot of cosplayers have where, if you looked at their very first one versus, the people that are winning top prizes, in, master craftsmanship at conventions now, there's probably a significant difference in where they started versus where they are now. So
yeah, absolutely. And some people come into it with their own unique skill set too, that like the goldsmith, the person who does goldsmithing, or anybody who's done other similar work in the past. Like I came into it having been sewing for many years because I liked to sew and my mom liked to sew. And so I had made, pajamas and Renaissance Festival clothes and stuff like that. Everybody has their own things that they bring to the table and everybody starts at different places. So I think it's important just not to compare yourself to others because you can really mess yourself up that way.
Yeah, very much so. So with all of that, though, even, not with the intention to compete, going forward, as you continue to create more cosplays, because I don't know about you, but I can't stop coming up with ideas at the very least. What are some things that you are seeing either when you're judging or, just going to convention and meeting, fellow cosplayers, and just, being on social media, what is it that you're seeing as far as products and technology that, excites you or makes you excited? Like, oh, I would like to try to use, a 3D printer at some point in the future or something like that. I had a shoot a couple weeks ago, and the photographer and I were talking about how it'd be really cool, and maybe somebody's working on this and it may exist already and we just don't know, if someone could make thread that is essentially a light, but it's like the thickness or the thinness of just regular like sewing machine thread, like what you would buy at your local, Joann's or something.
That would be awesome. The stuff
That
people
would be
can do with
awesome.
light in their costumes now is absolutely incredible.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely have seen over the last maybe 5 years, I feel like the materials space in cosplay has just really taken off. There's so much incredible stuff available now, and stuff that used to be hard to find is much more easily available, and the quality of everything has gone up. Like the fact that you can walk into Joann's and buy EVA foam, and you can buy sewing patterns that are specifically designed for cosplay. I have a local fabric store called Colorado Fabrics that sells Warbler in the store, which is awesome. There are places where like there's actually a place in Fort Collins that you can walk in and buy Arda wigs like off the shelf. And just the wig quality. Wig quality in general has just gone absolutely nuts now. Like if you want to get a lace front wig in pretty much any color, you can have it from you. Like you can have it to you from Amazon in like 3 days. Mm-hmm. And they're all like, the wigs are good. They're heat resistant. They're not like Party City wigs now. You can get them everywhere. It's amazing. Yeah. I definitely think 3D printing has been a huge game changer in cosplay. And it's one of those things. It's like digital art, where if you do digital art, people are like, oh, so it isn't hand drawn. I feel like there's some of that flavor with 3D printing where people are like, oh, so you didn't really make it. But I've seen people who have designed their own 3D print models, and it is absolutely just as difficult in totally different ways than like sculpting something or making it from foam. I think
that design.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's the space is changing because the bar has been raised. It used to be that if you wanted to make a Sailor Moon outfit, for instance, you'd have to pattern it all yourself. You might follow some tutorials that you found on LiveJournal or on DeviantArt. You'd probably have to do a lot of your own wig styling stuff. Nowadays, you'd have to resin cast your own jewels a lot of times. Now you can go to the store and you can buy a Sailor Moon Fuku costume pattern. You can buy a Sailor Moon wig online. You can buy resin gems in the right color, in the right sizes for each of the scouts. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's definitely made the bar for entry lower, which is awesome because it means more people can cosplay, but it's also made it a lot harder to stand out in that space, like we were saying with competitions.
Yeah. Yeah. The power of the internet, though, is just the access that we have now, even not just things to purchase, but just reference images and inspiration images, is, if you are looking to stand out, it don't necessarily, if you're willing to think outside the box a little, go with, if it's a video game player and they've got an alternate outfit, that's less known, do it. Or, sometimes mashups. I've got several mashups where I've taken 2 different fandoms and put them together to come up with, my own thing. Or look at the different art that's out there, someone like Hannah Alexander or No Flutter or someone like that who does fandom related art. You could get inspired by something. Or just, if you really want to go for accuracy, with the power of the internet, you can get your hands on good high resolution images that you couldn't get back in the day. Someone shared an image on a Facebook group of some gal from the 80s, I think, that built herself a Star Wars like X-Fighter pilot costume. And she did it just from going to the movie theater and watching the movie like several times, because otherwise there was no way to reference it.
Yeah, I did just a few years ago, I did an Arwen costume, just kind of spur of the moment for a friend's video project. And looking for resources from Lord of the Rings is so difficult because I didn't realize how dated that movie was until I was looking for like high resolution screen caps, which basically just aren't a thing. And I was reading blogs of people who had made Arwen's costumes, and they were saying things like, well, here's a photograph of the back side of an action figure that I found that has a photo of the costume on it, and you can see that there's a seam here. Or like, here's a picture that they took on set to make sure that they styled her hair the same way every day. It's like the kind of resources people needed to look for. And nowadays, video game companies will produce full high-resolution turnarounds of characters with like detailed little close-up of the details and stuff and the accessories. It's a completely different world. The challenges come in different places now.
Yes, yes, very much so. So, speaking of challenges, I guess, let's kind of turn things a little to, I guess we could cover both just like cosplay culture and just internet culture, because, you know, you've got your toes definitely in both of those pools, not just cosplay, but the fact that, you know, you've taken that and you're making, you know, you've put yourself out there on the internet and are making your living there. How have you found the culture has changed since you started? I know that you've got your own stories. I was just watching the video that you put up from a couple of years ago about how you had to file a police report against someone on Reddit.
Yes, my warning about online privacy cleverly disguised as a clickbaity storytime video.
Yes.
I was like, I want to tell people to protect their information privacy, but if I title the video that, no one will click it.
Yeah. But I mean, that's a very serious thing. I mean, anytime you decide to put yourself out there on quote unquote a public forum or platform, you know, there's this, you know, subset percentage of people who seem to think, you know, and it's gone beyond because of the internet culture, you know, the internet age we have now. It used to be, you know, people wanted to know, you know, the celebrity, you know, your Hollywood celebrity business, you know, in the tabloid magazines and, you know, rock stars and things like that. But now we have people living their lives essentially online. So it's not just, you know, what is J-Lo wearing at the beach that may or may not, you know, get people up in arms, but what is this, you know, what is PewDiePie doing that's, you know, getting people up in arms, and, you know, what's, you know, some random other person who makes their living off the internet doing that people may or may not agree with. So there's these, you know, these people, some people think that, you know, if you put yourself out there and you become a quote unquote public figure, then it's our right to, you know, analyze everything you do and everything you say, and you have to make us happy every single moment of the day. And how, you know, do you feel that pressure, or have you been doing this long enough that, you know, you're kind of like, you know, trolls are going to be trolls and whatever, you know, how do you handle that? Or does it even bother you at this point after so many years?
I mean, what bothers me has changed. I definitely have developed a thicker skin in some ways than I had when I first started doing this, because you kind of have to. It's like a survival thing. I mean, people are mean on the internet. Like, bottom line, when they can't see your face and they don't have to see your reaction, people will say really cruel stuff to you. And that's something that, we can talk about it until we're blue in the face. And I do think we should talk about it more, but it's not going to stop. That's just how people are when they are anonymous. And I think, for me, a lot of the shift has been in people are going to be mean whether you're somebody or not. But as my audience has grown, what I've started facing more of that is more difficult for me, I think, nowadays, if I get a comment that's like, you're ugly, it's like, okay. And then I block them and then I move on with my life. It used to upset me, but at this point I've gotten it enough times that it's like, well, that's just your opinion, man. So I can move on from that. But what I think is harder to deal with is something that I think you kind of touched on, which is parasocial relationships, which is basically how people, when they follow every facet of your life, when they see you post pictures on your Instagram story of your cat and your morning coffee and whatever, and they see you, converse with your significant other on Twitter and whatever, they start to feel like they know you and they start to feel like they have a relationship with you. And in comparison to celebrities like J-Lo or whoever, I think the idea of an online influencer, of a creative, is that we are more accessible and that we feel less like a celebrity and more like a person, no matter how many followers you have. So even though PewDiePie has millions of followers and in many ways is more popular than other celebrities, if you just look at the number of people that are fans of him compared to fans of, like, I don't know, Brad Pitt or whatever, like, he's extremely famous. Even in the context of actual celebrities, he's extremely famous. But because he's a YouTuber, people see him as more accessible and they see him as more human in some ways. And that can be to our detriment sometimes as online creators, because people see these things and they think they have a relationship with you. They develop this parasocial relationship, this one-sided relationship where they feel like they know you, but they forget that you don't know them. And that impacts the way that they interact with you. And so in my case, that means, sometimes people make a lot of assumptions about my life or me as a person. I've had people ask things like, your eyes are kind of red in this photo. Have you been crying? Just the kind of stuff where you're like, you don't ask that to a stranger, man. Like, that's inappropriate. And of course, I've gotten much more inappropriate stuff than that. But these kind of things, comments like that, they land in that sort of weird zone where it's something that a friend would say to you, but that a stranger on the street wouldn't. And people fall into this weird space online where they see you as a friend because of the way that you're approachable online, and they start treating you and talking to you the way they would talk to a friend, which is really not an appropriate way to speak to a stranger. I've had people speculate about my health. I've had people speculate about my relationships. People like to tell me that they think that my fiance is secretly gay. Just things like that, the kind of things that people decide to tell you. And that for me has been much harder than the hate, because hate is pretty easy to dismiss. But a lot of the people who have parasocial relationships with me are fans, and they are trying to be kind, and they're not trying to be assholes. It's just it's just sort of a weird space to be in, and it can be hard to handle. It can be hard to draw boundaries and figure out where those lines are. And it does make me question how much I should share, and whether or not I need to be more careful about the kind of information that I put out online. But also that authenticity is part of what creators like me sort of sell ourselves on. Like, if you if people don't perceive you as authentic and genuine, then they are going to be less into your work.
Yeah.
So it's a rock and hard place.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine that as the platforms change, and YouTube, especially specifically right now, in the last couple of years, they've been having, I don't know what's going on over YouTube, to be honest with you, but with adpocalypse and them changing the way that they do AdSense payouts to creators, how they changed the threshold. You had to have so many subscribers and so many hours watched, and the algorithm always seems to be keep changing. As someone who makes your living on the internet, you need to interact with the people that are your fans, because that gets them to keep coming back to consuming your content. And when YouTube decides to do something and change the algorithm so your stuff is no longer appearing in people's feeds, I imagine that makes it even harder. It's like, okay, how much more do I need to, expose myself, take that how you want, to make sure that, the people keep coming back and consuming my content so that I keep making money.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I noticed it was probably about 2 years ago that Facebook really tanked organic reach, and it started to be a big thing where people were struggling to reach the audiences that they had spent years building. In my case, I had tens of thousands of people on Facebook who I was reaching like maybe 1,500 of them with any given post. And what's so frustrating about that is you spend all of these years building this audience and connecting with them, and then suddenly you don't have access to them anymore unless you pay Facebook. And so one of the things that I was looking into a lot during that time was how to build community that's not dependent on a social media platform who can change the rules at any given time. And unfortunately, part of that does mean that you have to be incredibly engaged with your fan base in order to make sure that they are going to actively seek out your work, even when the social platforms don't decide to show it to them. Somebody needs to be a pretty big fan in order to type in your YouTube URL and go check to see if you have a new video versus just watching it when it pops up on their feed. And the creators that I have seen be most successful in that way with building that community are the creators that are 100% engaged with their fans, that are always interacting, that are answering questions and retweeting people and live streaming and doing whatever things that they can do to make their fans feel connected to them. And that does mean sacrificing an element of your distance, of a distance that can be not just mentally healthy, but also actually protect your safety. Like, I mean, I saw an article the other day about I think it was a K-pop star or something, who a fan tracked down where she lived based on the reflection of the city skyline in her eye in a selfie.
Yeah.
Wow.
You hear stuff like that, and it makes you question. It makes you question what kind of stuff you talk about. Like, I worry about saying, oh, I'm going to go to this concert or I'm going to go to this movie, because what if somebody sees that and decides to go there specifically to find you? Even if it's innocent, even if they just want to say hello, it makes you have to figure out where to draw that line between engaging enough with your followers that they feel connected to you and that they'll seek out your work, but not so much that they feel entitled to you and start crossing boundaries. And ultimately, you have no control over whether or not people cross boundaries. So it's, it's a situation.
Yeah. Like you can only control what you can control. You can control yourself and make those decisions, what you're most comfortable with. And, if someone decides to, take that and run with it, what are you going to do? I guess it depends on what exactly happens. So
yeah,
sometimes you have to file a police report against people. So
yeah. And what I really hope is that as this kind of thing becomes more prevalent, I mean, we've seen so many people get harassed off the internet and harassed into moving. People get death threats. They get photos of the outside of their house sent to them. They get swatted. Well, I think we've seen enough of that what I'm really hoping is that in the next few years, the actual laws will catch up with how it is to exist online. Because right now it feels like, for instance, one of the things I was just recently talking with someone about is the idea of publicly available information. So like in Colorado, your voting record is public and your voting record includes your address. So the only way to get your voting record, or not your voting record, but your voter registration, the only way to get your registration information unlisted in Colorado, as far as last time I checked, is if you're like a domestic abuse victim and you have like a restraining order against someone. I think that's the only allowable reason that Colorado has in place for removing your information. But there's people like me where if somebody has my full name and they want to look up my address, that's public information. I think the idea of what public information has really shifted since that went from, oh, you can go to the courthouse and request a document to, oh, you can Google it. and it's online in like the next 20 seconds. That I think is something that the law needs to catch up with. There are people who are like really at risk with having their information available publicly, and whether or not something should be available in case of like legal recourse, I think should be a very different situation than whether the average person should be able to look it up online.
Yeah.
Hopefully that stuff will change sooner, but I mean, you know, the pace of actual law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a can of worms.
The internet is just developing too quickly for society to keep up with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very true. So, back in the day, the internet was just for cat videos. We do have 2 cats.
I do.
That's a random way to make a segue. You do have 2 cats. So
I do. They're very handsome.
yeah. Well, so man, that was a serious.
Sorry, that took a dark turn.
No, that's totally okay. But yeah, that's one of the things that I, was kind of hoping that we could touch on when we had you on, because you're not the first person we've had on who's essentially found a way to make their living via the internet, and everyone's got their own way of doing things and what they're comfortable with. And the fact that you do have an incident where you had to go to the police is unfortunately not unique to society as a whole, but it is you're the first person that we've had on that's had something like that happen. So, but I think it's just a good reminder, if anything else, for the people listening, that odds are, if you're listening to us, you're someone who uses the internet, because that's how you get podcasts. It's just always a good reminder to be smart with your personal information and what you do online, whether you're someone who just goes on Facebook to catch up with family members, to someone who makes their entire living by living on the internet.
I think it's never too early to start protecting your information, because you never know when your internet presence could expand. Sometimes it happens unexpectedly and quickly, and the information you put out there stays out there. So like if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't have put my full name on anything. I would have probably, my cosplay name is my real name, like not my last name, my real last name, but like my name is Ginny. That's my real name. So if I could go back and change it, I probably would have just come up with an entirely new pseudonym that's completely not tied to my real identity. That ship has sailed, unfortunately.
Yeah. The internet is forever, people. So. Yeah. That's the big takeaway. Unless
you're trying to find something that you need that you posted a long time ago, and then the internet is inconstant.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
I did go to San Francisco last month, and we went to a restaurant that we'd went to last time we'd been in San Francisco, which was like 2 or 3 years previously. And I was able to go in my Facebook and find the photo album from the previous trip and see what it is I'd ordered. At the previous trip, so I could decide whether I wanted to order the same thing or something different. So
incredible.
Sometimes
the power of the internet.
The power of the internet. Okay. So I have no good way to try to get from serious subject to not serious. So I'm just gonna go with it. You did at the beginning there. You talked about how you've been a kind of a nerd, fan of nerdy things, and how that snowballed into doing cosplay and all that. But how old were you exactly when you hosted that Renaissance festival in your backyard?
Oh, geez. So it was right after I moved to Colorado. So that would have been 4th grade. How old are kids in 4th grade?
About 8 or 9.
So probably around then. I was probably probably 9 or 10 range when I went to my very first Renaissance Festival and decided I wanted to make my own. But that's always been sort of a hallmark of the way that I am a fan of things, is from the beginning, even before I got into this kind of fandom, my way of loving things was always to make something with them, to put my hands on the thing that I like and make something new. Early on, that manifested with me doing a lot of role play, like text-based role play stuff online. I was a big fan of Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern, so I ran like a Pro Boards forum role play for Dragon Riders of Pern that had like hundreds of members when I was in, I think, late middle school. And I used to write fan fiction, of course, draw fan art, all that kind of stuff that just comes when you like something, and so you make something with it. And cosplay, I think, is just an extension of that same drive.
I had to chuckle when I saw you tweet that about, what is something from your childhood that, pretty much is a precursor to where you are now.
Yeah, it's very on brand for me. I've always been like oh, I like this thing. I bet I could do it better. I'm going to do it now.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, oh my goodness, I was probably younger than you were with the Renaissance Festival, but it was 95, so no, that's probably about the same age, where I decided to do essentially a one-woman show recreation of several of the musical numbers from the Little Mermaid Disney movie in my grandfather's yard for him and some of the neighbors, except I wasn't smart like you were, and I didn't charge admission. My
dad raised me to be a capitalist.
Yes.
I'm rejecting all of that as thoroughly as I can while running a small business now.
Yeah. You recently posted kind of a Q&A type video on your channel. And one of the questions was, what was one of your like early, like, big fandoms, and to no one's surprise, part of your answer was Harry Potter. Since you're obviously a huge Harry Potter fan. I mean, you've got that Ravenclaws video that's 8 years old. But you also mentioned that you're a Doctor Who fan.
Well, I used to be.
You used to be.
Yeah, Stephen Moffat really murdered that for me. Doctor Who was the first fandom that I actually got like really deeply engaged in. I think it was the first time I'd ever cried at a television show episode. The episode where the Doctor and Rose are separated.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doctor Who was a big thing for me. I was very passionate about it for a few years there, and then Moffat got his hands on it, and man, I've always been the kind of person where I'm like, nobody can ruin something for you if you loved it before. Like, I don't, people saying, oh, the new Ghostbusters ruins Ghostbusters. I'm like, just go watch the old movie. But I definitely feel like Moffat taught me that you really can ruin something after the fact. Because now, even if I were to go back and watch David Tennant's arc as the Doctor, which is amazing and the best, and I love Eccleston too, but even going back and watching that, it's hard to not be aware of just how much Moffat's reign on the show drove it into the ground for me. It was very depressing. I felt like I genuinely mourned the loss of that show. And people keep saying that's what people keep saying is that the new stuff is much better, but it's going to be real hard to convince myself. I was scarred. I was wounded by Stephen Moffat. I'm traumatized still.
Well, I could kind of commiserate with that. Not necessarily with Doctor Who, but like for me, my first like big fandom that I was really into was the original Power Rangers. And before, it had, we knew what shipping was. My OTP was Tommy and Kimberly. And when they broke up and Kimberly moved and sent him that Dear John letter, like the series died to me. So I can kind of understand where, the people in charge made a decision as far as the storytelling, and you're like, no, you're dead to me now.
Yeah, and now I think I've had that happen with a few things because like Game of Thrones, I loved Game of Thrones very deeply. The final season was so awful that it's hard to even go back and watch the earlier seasons because all I can think of is what they're building towards and how awfully it ended and just how disappointing it was. And then even like Harry Potter is still one of I love Harry Potter still deeply to this day, but J.K. Rowling has really made it hard. Like her recent stuff has just made it very difficult to love Harry Potter in the same pure way that I used to.
Yeah, and the sometimes creators just need to know when to leave well enough alone.
Absolutely.
J.K. Rowling, Cub lover, Harry Potter's amazing, but yeah, she's not careful. She's going down George Lucas like territory as far as her creation.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that she built her whole series on Harry Potter lovers are the social justice warriors of today. She built her whole series on being accepting and defeating hate with love and stuff. And for her to now go on and have so many problematic stances on the things that the Harry Potter generation cares about now has just been difficult. I mean, looking back on the books, you can see how she's sort of like a halfway progressive. You look back and you see how few people of color there are in the books and how they're treated and handled, and you're like, okay, yeah, I can see the red flags now. But the current stuff with all of the Native American appropriation in the American Wizard stuff and just like her as a person and her stances on things, I feel like it's just a problem with the specific audience she built. She built an audience that's like, we are loving and caring and thoughtful. And she's like, all right. And I'm like a little transphobic. And you're like, whoo, that's not a good match. That's not a good match for the audience you've built.
It's like, your audience is older, but she's getting older too. And it's like, no, don't, JK, don't be one of those people as you get older.
Yeah, it's like, just at least stay quiet. If you can't be progressive, at least stay quiet.
Remember what it was like when we were younger. The joys of growing up with a fandom. And looking back at it, when you're not a kid anymore, looking back when you're older and you've got, the adult experience of looking back with adult eyes, you're like, this isn't resonating with me the same way it did when I was 10.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the nice thing is there's always new, stuff coming out as far as content from different, you could always find another fandom, or another fandom may find you, which seems to be actually the case more often than not.
Yes.
Where it's like, I didn't go searching for this fandom. It showed up, grabbed me by the hand and said, let's go. And here's all my money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for me, Critical Role has really replaced Harry Potter as like the fandom that I don't just enjoy watching, but that actually impacts my life and my outlook on life and my way of thinking about things. For a long time, that was Harry Potter for me. I felt like Harry Potter had taught me a lot about how I wanted to live my life and what kind of person I wanted to be. And now that I don't necessarily feel that from Harry Potter anymore, I definitely feel like Critical Role has replaced that in terms of just a great model for the kind of life I want to lead and the kind of creative I want to be. So it's nice to have something fill that void, because it was hard to lose Harry Potter in that place in my heart.
Yeah.
Critical Role does a way better job.
Yeah. But it's a combination of, your age and experience and, just where you are in life, the things that really defined who you were younger, brought you to where you are now, but don't necessarily fit into, who you are and your outlook on life and your goals and all of that. So it's just life. It's just life and growing up and getting older and, gaining experience with the world. So, but real quick, if you can, for those that aren't familiar with Critical Role, as someone who's not necessarily, part of the cast, but you're obviously very into it and are very familiar with it. For those that are unschooled, can you give us like a real short synopsis on what Critical Role is, other than what I know, which is a D&D campaign played on Twitch?
Yeah, so actually that is a good starting point, because there are plenty of people who have heard about Critical Role and still do not understand that it is just voice actors playing D&D live every week. And I think one of the reasons why it's hard for people to get that is that it sounds crazy. Like when you hear that, you don't think, oh yeah, I would love to sit down and watch other people play a game for 4 hours a week. It seems insane, but yeah, that's what it is. And I think what makes people love it so much is that each of the cast members, both Matt as the DM and all of the others as the players, they're all really good storytellers. And so I compare it less to watching other people play a game and more to watching live improvised storytelling, or even like improvised theater almost, because obviously they're all great actors, but on top of that, they are so passionate about their characters and they are so thoughtful about the way that they play. What you're really watching is you are watching a collaborative story come to life over the course of the weeks. And the framework they're using for it is D&D, but it doesn't feel like you're watching people play a game. It feels like you're watching people tell a story. And I think that's why so many people have fallen in love with the show, is they're all very good storytellers, and together they are weaving something really singular and really incredible.
Yeah. There's usually Critical Role's got some sort of presence at Gen Con. So I've seen the title, the name thrown around the years I've been going to Gen Con, but it wasn't until you actually and you and other cosplayers sharing your costumes and stuff, that I'm like, oh, this is like it's a story. And Matt Mercer and the rest of the cast have taken this game, Dungeons and Dragons, which has been around for ages, and turned it into something that's really fleshed out. Like, they've got these characters with, they figured out what exactly they look like and have these designs that allow, people like you and others to cosplay these characters. I recognize Jester now, when I wouldn't have known who she was before. I just been like, oh, that's a person with, blue makeup on. But now when I see someone cosplaying Jester, I'm like, I know who that is. I don't know much about her, but from what it sounds like, they've got, all these characters have backgrounds, and they've got, families in some case, and, whole, interactions with other characters, and all of these, all the things that we'd expect from a really fleshed out story that someone has written, like something like Harry Potter.
I think what's so cool about Critical Role and D&D as a method of storytelling is that normally if you were writing a story, one person would write the whole story, and one person would be responsible for creating every character and every character's backstory. And while some writers are very good at that, there are others where it's clear that they can't hold that many fully developed characters in their mind at the same time. And what's so cool about D&D as a storytelling method is that each person, other than Matt, of course, who has to do all the NPCs, is only responsible for their own character. And so they are able to dive into that character so fully and so deeply. They can really embody what that character would be feeling and what their history is like, and how their relationships are with other characters. And I think having a different person responsible for each character creates such an interesting element in terms of the interaction between characters, because no one person gets to control how both characters feel or how both characters behave. Instead, it's a combination of a very realistic interaction between two people where they each have their own stance and you never know what's going to happen between them. And of course, since they know they're telling a story, they do have some ability to inject narrative into it in a way that we don't in real life conversations. But it's such an interesting mix of those two things. I think it really allows for a lot of depth.
Very cool, very cool. And if any of our listeners want to give Critical Role, a shot, they do stream on Twitch, right? Because I've subscribed.
They
to
do,
them,
yes.
I believe.
Yeah, it might be hard to jump in the middle. You can check out Danny Carr does a show called Critical Recap. She works for Critical Role. She does a show called Critical Recap that are just a few minutes of recap on each episode. So you can look those up on YouTube if you want to get caught up, or you can read written summaries. There's a ton of information available out there. I actually have a video about how to get started watching Critical Role, which I think is still patron only, but I should release that this week because people always ask, they look into it and they're overwhelmed because there's two campaigns and they don't know what it is. And there's all this bonus material and they don't know where to start. And it's so much content. So I have a video about it that I've been working on just to help people figure out how to even get started because I know how overwhelming it can be.
Well, and that's a good segue here as we wrap up, I think. This is your opportunity to plug yourself, your Patreon, all your social media, all that fun stuff. So
sure. So I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and you can find me under Ginny D. That's Ginny Ginny like Ginny Weasley, and DI like Princess Di, but not pronounced Ginny Di because that sounds violent. Yeah. And then yes, I do have a Patreon. It is obviously some people are not into Patreon, that's fine, but if you are the kind of person who likes to pledge to creators, Patreon is where I make the majority of my money to sustain my business. Everybody on Patreon gets behind the scenes and early access type stuff to the work that I'm doing. I'm very close with my patrons. We have a Discord where we hang out all day. It's just a great way to get more involved if you enjoy my work, and I would really appreciate a pledge because it's super important to me creating the stuff that I create.
Yes, very much so. And we will make sure to put links to all of your stuff in the show notes of this episode so people can find it. And obviously, if they go to your website, from there, they can find pretty much everything. So
yes, yeah. My website, jennyd.com, will direct you to pretty much everything else that I do.
Yeah. So do you have any... I mean, we're getting late into the year now, but do you have conventions or anything coming up that you know that you're doing that you want to kind of plug out there? Or are you at home for a while now?
Thankfully, I have completed my last convention of the year for 2019. Okay. Which I'm ready to have a break. I do actually have, I think I have like 5 conventions I'm already signed on for next year, but I don't think any of them have officially announced me yet. Okay. So I'm afraid that I can't do that. However, I will announce those. I do announce those on my social media and stuff. So if you are looking for a local convention that I might be going to, then just keep an eye on that. And also, if you would like to see me at your local convention, the best way to make that happen is to contact the convention and request that they invite me as a guest, because that's what convinces them to spend the money on bringing me out. Yes.
Yep. Cool. Very cool. Well, Ginny, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us about some serious things and some not so serious things and fandoms and your adorable cats. And
of course, thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, I'm glad that we were finally able to get the schedules to align, and between my travels and then your travels. And you're like, I'm going to Norway, and I'm like, okay, well, we'll just wait until after you get back.
Yeah, last month was a bit of a disaster for me.
Yeah. So thankfully the stars aligned with everything. So now we've had you on. So this has been lots of fun. And like I said, we'll put links to your stuff in the show notes so people can find you and follow you and learn more about you. I guess my final question is, what exactly is it that you order at Subway every time you go?
Oh, oh man. Oh yeah, that's what I use when people ask why I don't change my hair color.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm the kind of person that does the same thing. Yeah, well, I'm super boring. Everyone's going to be like, wow, this girl needs to learn to eat food, because what I get at Subway every time is Italian bread, turkey, extra pickles, lettuce, and mustard, yellow mustard. I want so many pickles and so much mustard that I feel a little bit like I'm going to throw up. That's what I want out of a sandwich. I want it to remind me vaguely of bile. That's how much acid I want.
Oh my, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a good place to end this conversation right there. Pickles and mustard looks like bile.
Ended on the vomit.
Yes.
Well, if any of our listeners have any thoughts they want to share on this episode or anything we've ever covered, you can, which is a lot, I'm sure.
That's a lot. We're at episode 248. There's a lot to cover.
Yeah. Well, we might have some new listeners. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some people go back through the archive. Anyway, send us some feedback and tell us your thoughts, or anything you were like, hey, you missed so-and-so. And we'll cover it. And our email address to get in contact with us that way is fiveishfangirls@gmail.com. You can also visit our website, which is thefiveishfangirls.com, and that is where you can find all the links to our social media. Facebook, where we've got a lot of stuff up there, and Instagram, and YouTube is one place you can listen to our podcast and other videos that get posted from time to time. And leave comments and things, and we consider those feedback as well. If you would like to financially support us, we welcome that as well. We have a Patreon account, we have an Amazon store, we also have a merchandise shop, and all of that helps support keeping this podcast up on the intertubes, interwebs, internets, whatever you want to call it, it's there. And you can also find our podcast on your Apple Podcast feed, Google, and now I'm blanking on all the other ones. Oh my gosh.
Stitcher, Spotify.
Spotify. Yeah, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, we're pretty much there. So,
yep.
And thank you to all of our listeners, all of our feedbackers, all of the people who interact with us on Facebook, and those who support us on Patreon and all those other places, because, you make this so much more fun. So, just high fives for everybody.
Yay. Yay. All right. So with that, we shall sign off for this week.
This is Brittany in Bethlehem saying goodnight.
This is Chrissy saying goodnight from Salt Lake City.
This is Holly from Wisconsin saying good evening.
And this is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana. Until next time.
You have been listening to the Fiveish Fangirls podcast. You can find more episodes and information at thefiveishfangirls.com. Any and all books, movies, games, and any other forms of media mentioned are owned and operated by the respective copyright holders. No copyright infringement is intended or implied. If you wish to support the show, the easiest way is to leave us a rating and review. More ratings and reviews will make it easier for others to find the show. If you wish to support us monetarily, you can do so at patreon.com/Fiveish Fangirls Podcast. All money goes towards fees and equipment to keep the show going. For official Fiveish Fangirls merchandise, visit redbubble.com/people/Fiveish Fangirls. We love hearing from our listeners and encourage feedback. You can email us at fiveishfangirls@gmail.com. You can also like and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Fiveish Fangirls. Thank you so much for listening, and may the squee be with you.